Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I am your host, Jessica Ella, and today's episode is the second part of the How I Healed series, and it is how I healed sexual trauma. So we're going to be focusing specifically on, the ins and outs of healing specifically from childhood sexual trauma. The hardest truth about living with sexual trauma that nobody really wants to say out loud or nobody really speaks about is the shame. And one of the worst things that can happen, especially with childhood sexual trauma, is that instead of realizing that what happened was wrong or disgusting, we start to believe that we are wrong and disgusting. And we take what happened to us as meaning something about ourselves. And it's probably one of the hardest things when it comes to sexual trauma, because this belief that it's us that's wrong, or it's us that's bad, or it's us that is disgusting, makes us feel like we need to hide it and we need to keep this secret. And when you carry this secret, like the longer that you carry it, the heavier it becomes. And it also means that we can't heal, because we can't heal what we can't say out loud. We can't heal what we don't acknowledge. And so carrying this secret and these feelings of shame and guilt and disgust and these beliefs about ourselves is probably one of the hardest things when it comes to healing sexual trauma. And it's why I'm so committed to speaking about it on social media and to sort of breaking down, I try not to focus on it all the time and try not to focus on it too much, because it is a heavy subject, but I try to be really open and honest about what it's like, because so many of us feel the same way, but we're too afraid to say it out loud. It's this unspoken truth, and people are starting to get really good at saying it wasn't your fault and I believe you. And those are like two really common things that we say to people, because in the past people weren't believed. I mean, people still aren't believed, but also that people are aware that we do believe that it's our fault that it happened. And that's mostly because children believe that everything's their fault. They internalize everything for that first sort of 10 years of life. But we've started to realize that, but we haven't really realized the depth of also what it does to a person's body, a person's autonomy over their body. It ripples into, people pleasing other people, because you've been learnt to put other people's needs above your own and to please them, whether it be sexually or in other ways. But, when you learn it sexually, you learn it in every way. You learn to just completely shut down and sacrifice your body, your needs for somebody else. So our body starts to become not our own, or we don't want our body to be our own because we're repulsed by it. We're disgusted by it. It feels uncomfortable to be in it. And so one of the most detrimental things is that we leave our body. And this is why dissociation and sexual trauma are so intertwined, because if somebody's saying something mean to you, it doesn't really generate the same level of panic and fear and violation to cause that dissociation as something like sexual trauma does. And so it's the same as physically being harmed. Like, we leave our body to almost remove the feeling of betrayal and disgust, and to not have to experience it. So what it really starts to rob women of is any sort of body autonomy, any sort of feeling, comfortable or safe in their body, but also pleasure. And when you learn that pleasure is shameful, it doesn't just affect you sexually in relationships and in romantic situations in the future. It affects you in every sense of the word pleasure. It affects your ability to take pleasure in drinking a cup of tea or going for a walk or swimming in the ocean. Like, you don't take pleasure in anything because pleasure just is so linked with shame. So these women often end up overworking, and they end up just not enjoying anything in life because pleasure has become so shameful, as well as receiving. We learn that it's not safe to receive. It's not safe to give. It's not safe to trust people that you love, especially if it's somebody that has done that to you, that it is someone that's in your family. So we start to lose our trust in people as well, and in connection with other people. So it really starts to, from something that you think is an isolated type of trauma, it really starts to ripple into every area of your life. Sexual trauma, from me, stole the ability to actually feel, one, comfortable in my body, but also to feel beautiful, to feel desirable, and to feel sexy without feeling shame around that. Because to me, being sexy or feeling desired by somebody came with this intense feeling of shame and disgust. Like, if I knew that somebody was desiring me, I linked it with the same feelings that I would feel with my dad desiring me, which was confusion and disgust and this feeling of wrongness. And so it really stole this any sense of being able to claim sexuality, from being able to claim feeling sexy or showing up sexy or wanting to be desired, from sex being what it is, which is a natural, normal human thing. Like, you know, the female clitoris has more nerve endings than anything else in the human body, even in a male human body. So like, there is anatomically this, we're supposed to receive pleasure. Women are supposed to be able to receive pleasure. And when you shut that part of you down, you lose this spark, you lose this life force, you lose this, it's like this confidence, this energy source, this excitement, this passion, this part of what makes you a woman. And when you lose that ability to receive, and you lose that connection to this knowing that you deserve to receive pleasure just for the sake of it, it starts to become transactional. And all of a sudden, its pleasure is about giving, and it's only about giving, and giving to the man and meeting the man's needs. And we become conditioned to see sex as something that is just for them, just for giving. And we in that process lose this pleasure for every area of life. I didn't think that I was ever going to get that back. I always thought that sex would be for the man. I always thought that I would be really uncomfortable talking about sex or feeling feelings of pleasure from receiving, from, you know, so many different things sexually. And because there were so many different types of sexual trauma that I'd been through, and different memories and, you know, types of molestation over the years with my father and my grandfather, there were so many things in the past before I healed that I was so uncomfortable doing. And they were very normal sexual things, and I was so uncomfortable doing them because they just felt, I would have flashbacks and I would feel shame and disgust, and I'd place that shame and disgust around those things and around myself, and not around the fact that that was actually the abuse. And that, again, sex is normal. Like, it's how we create babies. We are like designed to do that. Like, it's not the only reason that sex has become shameful and not something that's just beautiful and two human beings connecting and receiving pleasure. And the only reason that it's moved away from that is because of people like child abusers, like predators, because people have taken it to this dark and twisted place, and it's not meant to be that. It's meant to be this light, loving, beautiful experience. And I didn't think that sex was ever going to be anything other than that. I didn't think that I would be able to enjoy it and to actually have like a high sex drive and to want it and desire it and to love it. And I do now, but it took so much healing around shame. And shame is just, it creeps back in, and it's hard not to feel that shame when you've been through a lot of trauma. But I went on a very long journey after my divorce where I read all the books around this subject, and I really focused on reclaiming my body as my own. And I think that that's where it really comes from. It's not about how can I please a man, or, you know, how can I please my partner? It's not about the act of sex. It's actually, at the end of the day, about claiming your body back. It's about releasing all of that shame around your body in general, because a lot of women, it doesn't just affect their lives, their sex lives, it actually also affects the way that they perceive themselves. They just can't even think about themselves from the waist down. They're disconnected from their vagina or their vulva. Like they just don't even want to think about that part. They're disgusted by it. They hate it. And that is really in itself negativity towards your body, towards a part of your body that's completely normal and natural, and it's a part of your body. It's like, imagine just hating your nose, like, and just trying to pretend that it wasn't there. Like, it's so foreign to me that we can really have such a stigma around this area of our body, and it comes from years of generational trauma and oppression and just people saying that's wrong and that's disgusting and you don't talk about that and you've got to hide that and pretend it's not there and be a lady, and all of these different narratives that we get fed around not being able to actually to claim that sexuality and what's actually a really natural, normal thing. And the way that I see it is that, if in Australia 1 in 3 women are being sexually abused in their childhood, that's probably where the issue is coming from, of women that are hating sex, not enjoying sex, not loving their bodies, not wanting to be in their bodies, and experiencing so much shame. It's where it's coming from, and it's such a big problem. It really shaped the way that I felt about my body. I never had an experience until later on in life when I started healing of feeling like my body was my own. My body was almost the property of my father from as early as I can remember, my first memory being 3. And because it wasn't a nice place to be, because I associated my body and especially like my vagina, especially I associated that with shame and with disgust and with unhappy experiences. I didn't want to think about it, know about it. I just wanted to disconnect from it completely. It's actually really interesting. When I was 5, I needed to have a small surgery because the actual opening of my vagina had grown a layer of skin. Like almost overnight, it had grown this layer of skin. So over it, I can't remember what, my mum knows what the name of it is called. There is a name for it. But it had grown this layer of skin over the opening so nothing could actually go in. And I think it's labial fusion. It's called labial fusion. And this, I had to have a surgery to have it cut open. But this was just such, when I found this out when I was older, it was such a sign to me that like my body was actually trying to protect me. My body was actually responding to this trauma by growing this skin to stop anything from happening, to stop anything from coming in. Our bodies are very intelligent, but we start to disconnect from them, from our bodies, because we just don't want to feel those feelings of shame and to feel that discomfort and that disgust. And I really did take this into other areas of like into later areas of life, like because my body wasn't my own and I believed that it was what I needed to give my dad in order to love me. The only time that I remember him being loving towards me was when I was doing these sexual things with him or for him. And so eventually I learned that that's what love was. And when I was in my teenage years and my 20s, I just thought and truly deeply believed that if I liked a boy, that's what I had to give him my body. That was like the only way that I could get him to love me, was to give him my body. And it obviously didn't work very well because teenage boys are assholes. And also it just isn't really, it wasn't It didn't work out. There was a lot of trauma that was driving that. And so it just stacked more trauma on top of more trauma of like, even when I give my body, they still don't love me. And that was the way that I felt with my dad a lot of the time too. And I was just repeating this cycle and just feeling more and more shameful, to the point where I rarely speak or rarely spoke about that part of my healing. Like I didn't want to admit that I used to do that. I didn't want to admit that I had been sleeping with these boys in order to try and get love from them, because that felt shameful in itself. And then I took that on as like, what was wrong with me? Why was I doing that? Like, I'm so pathetic and hopeless. And why was I just, giving my body to these boys, instead of being like, well, that's what you do. That's what you learned. That's what you truly believed that you needed to do in order to be loved, and you just wanted to be loved. And taking that shame out of it, we just carry it and we collect it and we add to it. And it got to the point where when I did start to try to reclaim my body, I'm just like, do I say this or do I not say this? When I started to reclaim my body, there was a period of time where I realized that I had never had a period of time in my life from as early as I can remember where I wasn't being used or required to give my body to somebody sexually. Ever. Like, I had never not been required to do that. You know, normally we have these childhood foundational years where our body is our own. And if we want to experiment and we want to touch ourselves, we can, but our body is for us, and our body is for us, and there's no shame around that. Because I had been sexually abused from such a young age for so long, I got to this point in my 30s where I was like, I actually just want like a couple of weeks, if not a month, where I don't need to give my body to anybody else in order to be loved, where I can just be without sex or sexual acts being a part of the equation. And so I felt really strongly about this, and I felt like this was something that I really needed for my healing, was to have this like small period of abstinence. And long story short, I went to my now ex-husband and told him that this is what I was needing for my healing, and because of everything I'd been through, that I needed this period where we just didn't have sex, we didn't talk about sex, but instead we just hugged and we, you know, and he made me feel safe, and it was just taken off the table for a little while. And unfortunately, he was very non-receptive to this idea and really shamed me for wanting that, and didn't understand why I wanted that, and was actually quite awful about that need that I had. But that was actually also really happening for me, because that was one of the moments where I realized that he was never going to be able to I was never going to be able to heal while I was still in that marriage, and that he was never going to be able to meet any need that I had if he couldn't understand that that was a need that I had then. And it was actually a really pivotal moment for me, because I took my power back and eventually left. And then I got to spend quite a few months where I really took my power back sexually, where my body was my own for a long period of time. And then when I did decide to engage, I did it from like a really empowering, exciting place where it was like, I want to do this and I want to experiment. I want to try this. And I started to do it from this desire. But I actually got that period of time where my body was not somebody else's. It was completely 100% mine. And that was a really important time too. When I was in that marriage, I did think that there was something wrong with me, and I did think that I'd never be able to heal sexually. I always thought that I would have triggers or flashbacks or be really uncomfortable with certain sexual acts, and I thought that I would never feel sexy, I would never feel comfortable in my body or confident or desirable without feeling a feeling of shame. And it's absolutely not true. Once I left and I went through this really intense healing period where I started to work on my beliefs around shame and around sex and around being sexy, and, you know, whether it feels safe to show up like that, and you know, just working through all of those layers that come with pleasure and receiving and sex and shame. And I actually went so intensely into it and really did start to heal and discovered so many amazing things that I ended up running an event where I had 20 women come, and I then helped them with uncovering everything that I'd uncovered. And we had a sexy dance class with this lady that came in and taught us how to do that. And we did a breath work where we were like channeling all of our sexy energy, and we were channeling energy from our vulva up to our heart, and we were connecting them. And it was this really powerful healing day. And it was actually interesting because I remember saying when I was advertising, I'm only going to do this one event because I feel really strongly about it right now and passionate, and I have a lot to give, but it's not my whole message. And so yeah, a lot of women always remind me about that event that came and like, that was so powerful, it was so amazing. But I went really intensely into this period, and I have now actually incorporated a lot of this into Triggered to Thriving. I've talked about, being sexy and reclaiming your body. And it's really interwoven throughout that program for anyone who does have sexual trauma, wondering if that program's right for you. It really does have a lot of that interwoven throughout it. And I took all of those experiences and weaved it in there. But I definitely had periods where I thought, I'll just be like this forever. Like, I'll probably always have flashbacks, or I'll probably always have things that I'm uncomfortable with. I just took each of those things that were coming up and looked at, is there a memory that relates to this? Is there something that can be healed here? Is there more work that I can do? And just kind of took that same approach that I have taken with everything of one more memory, one more layer, one more belief, one more healing. This silent shame. And I think like I felt shame when I was being intimate or when I was having sex, and I felt shame when I wasn't having sex. And I think that was probably one of the most difficult things to navigate, because when I wasn't, I felt like I should, because I felt like I owed it to somebody, or I owed it to my partner or boyfriend at the time. And then when I was doing it, I felt disgusting for doing it, and I felt like I was wrong for doing it, and it felt uncomfortable and icky, and I just didn't want to be doing it. But then I felt like I should. And so I felt like there was always this silent battle going on inside me between, I should be doing it, but it feels wrong, but I should be doing it, but it feels wrong. And it was really exhausting. And I think that's where I really wanted that period of like not having to even think about it. It just not even being on my radar, so that I could just have some time to myself, to not be feeling like I owe that to somebody. And I think it rippled from sex and sexuality into other areas of my life, because it was like, I need to please him. And this was my narrative from a young age. I need to please him. I need to do anything I can to please him. And yes, it starts sexually, but then it ends up into, I need to make sure his dinner's cooked, and I need to make sure I've given him this and given him that. And I need to make sure I'm not talking back or doing anything that might upset him. And I need to please my boss, and I need to please my friends, and I need to please everyone and do everything for everybody else. And I need to please them and give to them, because nobody's going to love me unless I'm giving. And when I receive, it feels so scary and uncomfortable, because I've linked that with trauma, that I just pretend like I don't need anything. And I remember one of the hardest things in marriage counseling was her constantly saying to me, like, you need to identify what your needs are, because no one can ever meet your needs if you don't even know what they are. And I remember being like, I don't know what they are. I don't have any needs. I'm fine. I'm good. Don't worry about me. I had so many needs, but I pushed them so far down, because receiving and allowing someone to look after me felt so unsafe and uncomfortable, because of everything that I had been through with that sexual trauma. And this is why people say it's not really so much about the actual physical memories, or like the visual memories, where you can like see what's happening and you have the flashbacks. It's all of the things that happen as a result of that. It's the way that it affects your life and your existence in everyday life that actually affects you so much more. It's actually so much worse. The scariest moment of facing this sexual trauma was, there were definitely memories that were more intense than the others. There were lots of memories that were kind of the same context, and that were, doing things or having things done to you. And I leaned into those and I worked on those, but I really avoided the memory of being raped by my father, and the memory earlier on of being raped by my grandfather or his father. I really avoided those ones because they felt more intense, more traumatic, more violating, more feeling to them is different. And anyone who's been through sexual trauma and rape, especially from a younger age, will know that there is a level of terror and pain and confusion, that there is this threshold. We can sort of cope with a certain level, but there is another level that we can't cope with, that our body just can't handle. And the level of confusion and terror in those memories made me push them to the back for a long time. it made me kind of, oh, I'll work on this memory, I'll work on that memory, I'll do that one soon. I'll look at that one soon. I'll process that one soon. I'll come to that one. And I would say to myself, I'm just not ready for that one yet. I'm just not ready. It's really big. I'm just not ready. And I kept pushing those bigger ones back and I kept struggling. And eventually it came to the point where I was like, if I want to heal, I do actually have to go into these bigger memories. And I often say this to people now, and like, we work with those bigger ones first because they actually do provide the biggest relief. They provide the biggest transformation, the biggest healing. It's always the things that we don't want to do and that we don't want to go into that give us that biggest result. And I kind of wish that sometimes I had have wished that I had have gone into those first. And I remember doing them and healing them. And then a couple of days later being like, why didn't I do that years ago? Why did I wait so long? Why did I push it back? And it was just because I was so afraid of what I was going to feel and what I was going to have to go through again by witnessing it. But I was actually having flashbacks of it all the time anyway. I was unconsciously living it over and over and over in different ways, all of that time that I was avoiding healing it. And so again, I open with a lot of my clients by saying, like, if you're having flashbacks of it and it's coming back in your dreams, or you're having nightmares all the time, you have nothing to lose in processing it. You have nothing to lose in actually going into it and starting to heal it. But we do definitely avoid, and I did avoid those more intense traumas because of the level of panic and emotion and fear that came up in those memories. A lot of people ask about, how you work through that and whether you can heal without forgiving that person, or whether you need to forgive that person in order to heal. And the way that I always describe this to people is that somebody who, again, it really depends on what happened and on the level of trauma and on the frequency of trauma and on the person. But the way that I think about it is somebody who has done something awful to you, but they accept what they've done and they apologize and they try to make amends and they try to make it right. Depending on the situations, I think sometimes those people do deserve to be forgiven. But then I believe that people who don't take any responsibility and don't, own up to what they've done, and they don't try to help you to heal, and they don't own up, I think that those people in that situation deserves acceptance. But I don't think that you can heal and move forward unless you either accept or forgive, or accept and forgive. And with my grandfather, there is acceptance. There is an acceptance of something horrific. He must have been raised with some pretty horrific things. And I know a little bit of his past to do with like the Holocaust and fleeing Hungary and like a lot of trauma in his childhood. Something must have happened for him to make him the way that he was. But in my mind, and knowing what he's done, he is pure evil. And I accept that because of what had happened to him, he was the way that he was, and what happened. With my father, it's a little bit harder because I was so much closer to him. I do find that, and a lot of people ask me this about my father, like my father I've cut him out of my life, but he denies anything ever happening. He has told a lot of people that I'm crazy and I'm making up stories and all these sorts of things. And there is no level of him accepting, taking accountability, apologizing for what he's done, trying to heal, trying to, work on himself and figure out his own trauma. And so, but I do still find that there is a part of me that forgives him. And I don't know if this is because there was a day where he did apologize to me. He didn't say what for, but he was quite emotional and he just randomly said to me, I'm so sorry for everything that I did to you. And I just kind of was like, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it. And was a bit uncomfortable with the conversation at the time. But I think that when we hate, the opposite of forgiveness is holding on to something. When we forgive, we're releasing. Otherwise, we're holding it. And I think that by holding on to any anger or resentment or frustration around what he did, it's only living inside of me. It's not living inside of him. He's out there living his life, and there's no point in me not forgiving him. And so I do forgive him. I do forgive him for what he's done. But I don't think that you need to forgive in order to heal. And I think that you can just come to a level of acceptance and understanding of most people. Every person who sexually abuses a child has been sexually abused as a child, and that doesn't make it right. There are plenty of people that don't do it and choose not to do it, and it is a choice. But at the end of the day, there is something happening there that's causing them to do that. And I always just pray that those people uncover why, and that they heal, and that they stop that behavior, and that they end the cycle from their end. But I think that we do have to come to some version of peace with what happened in order to be able to move forward. Otherwise, we are living with anger and resentment and frustration and just these feelings of like, what if, and why did it happen, and why did it happen to me? And we get really stuck in that victim mindset as well. So we have to be able to do what we need to do in order to move forward and to accept that it happened, and it was something that happened in the past. So when I started to heal, the process of rebuilding trust with myself and my body actually started with, first of all, kind of tapping into not just my body, but my body's knowing and my intuition. So I started to ask my body, do you feel comfortable in this situation? Do you feel comfortable around this person? I started to, do these exercises of coming back into my body and realizing which situations made me restrict, which, people made me tense up. And I would notice there'd be certain people that I was around that my fists would clench and my whole body would tense up. And I started to notice the way that my body was reacting to different people and situations. And I started to trust it. And I started to ask my body what it needs. And I started to really tap into my body and into letting my body guide me over my mind, because my mind would say to me, everything's okay, everything's fine, don't worry about it. And my body would lock up. And so I wasn't able to actually move forward and heal until I started to actually listen to that body. And I started to notice, again, things that were comfortable for me sexually, things that weren't comfortable sexually, and starting to look at why aren't they? Why is that coming up? Why does that happen? And I have this with so many clients too. They say, like, anytime I do this thing with my partner, I clench my fists and I clench my whole body and I close my eyes and I just can't wait for it to be over. And I'm like, that's trauma. That's your body telling you that thing is not safe. You need to figure out why, and why it's not safe for you to do that, and where that comes from. So I really started to use each of those as my indicators that something that needed to be healed. And I started to find and uncover and process the memories, as well as then having that time for my body to just be my own, and to not, have to give anyone anything in that sexual way, but also uncovering all of those beliefs around it not being safe to be sexy. It's not safe to be wanted. It's not safe to be desired. It's not safe to show up in certain ways. It's not safe to dress in certain ways. Really starting to look at all of those things that I believed about being sexy, about sex, about love, about pleasure, about how those all intertwine. And there is a book that I highly recommend as well. It's a very outrageous book. It is very loud and out there, but it is called Pussy, in line with everything I just said. And it's written by Regina Thomas Hauer, and it's called Pussy, A Reclamation. And it is a very eye-opening book. It is where I learned a lot of this. I've read it 3 times now, so it's one of my favorites. It's very powerful. And it is actually about women reclaiming their power and their pleasure. And, that this is inherently ours, and that we do deserve it, and that everything that tells us that we don't is either society or past trauma, and that we actually can work through and heal through that in order to reclaim it, which is why it's called Pussy, a reclamation. So reclaiming those parts of yourself that we avoid and shove and push down, that book was a huge shift for me, and I highly recommend it for any woman with sexual trauma who is quite far down her healing journey, because if you are not, it could be very triggering. It's definitely, you need to have done a level of like memory processing and trauma work to be able to integrate what she talks about in that book, because there's a lot of things in there that really push the boundaries and push the edge of what's comfortable and normal. One lie about sexual trauma that I want to burn to the ground right here, right now, is that it's something that happened in the past. It's the same with any trauma, really, but definitely with sexual trauma. People say, it happened so long ago. I was a child. I was a teenager. Like, it doesn't affect me now, or, it doesn't really matter. It happened in the past. And that is, to me, avoidance of any pain or discomfort. That's a person who doesn't want to look at it or go into it because it's too uncomfortable. And everything that happened to you in the past, if you haven't processed it, is affecting you now until you process it. The other thing as well is that I want women to know that no matter what their brain is telling them, that they didn't want it, even if you learnt to want it, you didn't want it initially, you learnt to want it. Like, so many women feel so ashamed for, putting themselves in situations later on in life after sexual trauma, or for feeling like they wanted the abuse because they've been conditioned that way. And I think that was one of the hardest things for me to deal with. I've spoken on a number of podcasts about memory that I have of asking my dad for abuse because he was being so awful to me and yelling at me and screaming at me. And I remember thinking, like, how do I make him love me? How do I make it stop? And that was the only way that I knew how. But I held so much shame for that because it was like I asked for the thing that made me feel the worst. I asked for the abuse. I asked for the trauma, but I was conditioned to ask for that. I was conditioned to believe that that was the solution. And so I know a lot of women who have felt a lot of power from hearing me talk about that, and knowing that if they also felt like at times that they wanted that abuse, it was because they actually wanted that love and because they didn't know any other way at all to get it. What I wish someone had have told me when I was in the thick of trying to heal this sexual trauma was that it's actually okay for you to not want to have sex for a period of time. It's actually okay for you to take your body back and for you to say to somebody, I love you, but for a period of time, I need my body to be my own, and you're going to have to sort yourself out. Because, like, I think we deserve to have a period of time where we get to make that choice. Like, your body is yours. It's your choice what you do or don't do with it. And I want you to start making empowered decisions. And if you find yourself thinking, I should have sex with them, I should have sex with him, I should do that, that is not the reason that we should be having sex. That is not the reason that we should be engaging. If you're thinking that all of the time, it's time for you to take a break. It's time for you to reclaim your body, build that connection back up with your body, with your vulva, build that, comfortability in your body, releasing all of that shame, but so that you can come back to it from a new perspective, so that you can come back to it with no shame. You can come back to it with excitement and passion and desire and actually want it, not feel like it's something that you have to give. Every survivor who is listening, who feels broken beyond repair, who doesn't feel sexy, who doesn't feel comfortable with sex, who feels shame all the time, embarrassed about her body, uncomfortable in her body, I want you to know that healing actually is possible. And unfortunately, it does take you leaning into all of that discomfort, because avoiding it so far hasn't really helped you. Avoiding it, you're still experiencing it every time you look in the mirror, every time you have sex, every time you don't have sex. It's still coming up all of the time. But you actually have to lean fully into it in order to heal it. And this is why I say that this podcast is for brave women, because it is really brave to do this work. It is really brave to lean in when most people avoid, distract, numb, project, pretend like it's not there. It is really brave to lean into it, but it is also the only way that you can heal. So I want you to be brave. I want you to do the thing that feels scary. I want you to do the thing that you've been desiring, that you've been being drawn towards. If the idea for you of taking sex off the table for a period of time brings up a massive response in your body, I want you to look at it. I want you to look at why it's bringing up that response, why your relationship, like if your relationship can't hold that, then there's some issues that you need to work through in your relationship that you're potentially avoiding as well. So be brave, look at it, look at what your body wants, look at what your body's asking you for, what it's craving, read the book Pussy, and you can do this. You can absolutely do this. And out the other side, you're going to actually want sex. You're going to love it and you can be excited for it. It's going to feel like it actually fills you up. I used to think of sex as like someone was taking something from me. And now I feel like it's connecting me with somebody that I love, and it's like building that connection, and it's giving me more energy, love, passion for life, all of those things. Like I can feel it giving me more energy than what it is taking away. And in the past, it was that it really felt like it was taking a little piece of my soul. Now it feels like it brings it back. And so you want that and you're excited for that. And it's not a chore. It's like something that you get to do. It's something that you want to do. And so it also allows you to build that connection in a really powerful way. And I think you start to be able to have intimacy with somebody in a way that is much deeper than in the past. I know in the past, sex was just sex. Now sex for me is actually intimacy. Sex is actually a way to connect it's a time when you can be with somebody and you're like you're most vulnerable as well. And so when you see it as a negative and as something that you have to do, you're kind of avoiding that vulnerability. And when you actually tap into it from like an empowered place, you're also opening up a new level of connection and depth and vulnerability. So there is a lot to look forward to. And I know that probably now you're thinking there's no way that I would actually want it. I only do it because I have to. I promise that I thought the same thing, and it is possible. So if you know somebody who has experienced sexual trauma, please share this episode with them, give them some hope. If you haven't already, please subscribe to whichever platform you're listening on, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening.